freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's RSM Classic. Joining me to break it all down, we've got him, Keith Stewart. Keith, good to have you, bud.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be with you. Let's go on a run this week, huh?
Yeah, let's do it. Usually we'd have Greg Ducharme here. I had a little bit of travel, so we were looking for someone to take his place, and I said, I know a guy. I know Keith Stewart from Read the Line. I know he loves this golf course or golf courses, and we've got a lot to talk about.
Yep. There's no doubt about that. This is two very special places from my PGA career, no doubt.
All right, well, let's jump right into it because we're ending this FedEx Cup fall with not one, but two courses. We've got the Seaside course at Sea Island Resort, and we've got the Plantation course. Now, we know, Keith, that the Seaside course is going to play host, but for the first 2 days, everybody is going to get around on each one of these golf courses. How do we start to differentiate between the Seaside course and the Plantation course?
Well, the Plantation course is going to score a little bit easier, mainly because they have those 4 par 5s. Both courses are relatively short. And, I don't know if you want to jump there yet, but there's going to be a bit of weather there on Thursday. So whoever draws that Seaside on Thursday is going to have a much more difficult day than the people on Plantation, which is a little bit more tree lined and a lot more protected.
Yeah, the wave advantages can get pretty significant around here. So as we chat on this Monday afternoon, we don't have the tee times yet. So we are playing a wait and see type of game. But I think that's important to note, Keith. I'm glad you brought it up because the rotation has historically been, I mean, if it's a shot and a half, that's pretty significant across the field in terms of an average.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And it looks as if, 4 of the last 5 winners have gone Plantation, then Seaside, and that's weather independent. So it almost seems like if you can get off to a hot start on the easier golf course, then it's, all gas, no break from there.
And when you look at the guys that have had success around this tournament, so both golf courses, you see a lot of, I don't want to call them plotters, Keith, but guys that aren't necessarily the longest in the world, right? You mentioned it, by PGA Tour standards, these are relatively short golf courses, staying within the trees, staying out of trouble, and giving yourself plenty of opportunities to play out of the short grass seems to be one of the ways to find success.
I think a great comp course, maybe it's not as picturesque, but it's along the ocean. And that's when they play the AT&T Pro-Am out there at Pebble Beach. And they have all those golf courses. You have to play positional golf off the tee here. Now, I've played both golf courses many, many times. And for me, it's just driver. But for these guys who are much longer than I am, there's definitely places that you want to hit to. They aren't the longest holes in the world. For them, believe it or not, from a 400 to a 450-yard par 4 is not that long. It's basically like a 3-wood driving iron and a scoring iron. So I think at the end of the day, you really have to keep an eye on guys that are really good at getting in the fairway, proximity to the hole, and of course, they got to be able to putt.
Yeah, you got to be able to make putts. Now so that's kind of off the tee, a little bit of putting. And you mentioned it, a scoring iron in hand. When you start looking at some of these distances, it does tend to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, you get a lot of wedge opportunities, you get a lot of short clubs into these greens to set up those birdie opportunities that you're obviously going to want to take advantage of.
There's no doubt about that. I think it's 10 of the 12 par 4s are under 440 on Seaside, and 7 of the 10 on Plantation. So you're sitting there. For those guys, that's gap wedge, pitching wedge, 9-iron into all those greens from the layup point.
Yeah, the Plantation course, whether you're starting on 1 or on 10, 1 and 2 are 2 par 4s that are 373 and 380. 10 is 372. You get a par 3 at 11, and then a 400-yard par 4 on number 12. There's some short opportunities to get you out of the gate here, potentially rack up those, those birdie streak bonuses and things of that nature. You talked about getting off to a hot start, not just on the Plantation course in general, but like immediately out of the gate, you can start taking advantage.
Oh, there's no doubt. The first hole there, you could land a plane there, and it's like 370 yards. Guys like Ludvig, they could the guys, they hit it as far down there as they can, and then they pitch it on because it's a perched green. It sits kind of sideways at a weird angle. But when you're hitting in from 30 yards, it's a scoring hole. And the second hole is the same way. Just a tree down the left gets in the way. But they hit 2-iron, probably sand wedge in there. It's birdies all the way. Fourth hole, par 5. I mean, it's just right away on Plantation. You can go after it, and the back nine's the same way.
Yeah, lots of opportunities out there. Here we go. Before we switch over to the cheat sheet, last 5 winners: Adam Svensson, Taylor Gooch, Robert Streb, Tyler Duncan, and CH3 Charles Howell III. Is there a through line, Keith, between those names that ended up hoisting the trophy on Sunday afternoon?
I mean, they all seem like the same guy. Like if we were called into the precinct and they were in a lineup, I mean, their stature would be similar. I mean, they're like the same guy over and over again. And there's 2 things that they do that the stats tell us is that they're very good on approach and they're even better at putting. And obviously, this is coastal Bermuda, so you got to know how to putt these greens down there in the low country. You got to putt towards the rip. If you know what that means, then you're definitely going to make a lot of putts.
Yeah, you're doing good if you know what putting towards the rip means. All right, well, we're going to start naming some names. We'll go through the top of this board and all the way down to the bottom. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
It's never too soon for college hoops. It's the Arizona Tip-Off on CBS Sports Network.
And we're back. Keith, let's jump into this. This is the cheat sheet on rickrungood.com. There are 3 golfers over $10,000. It's Ludvig, it is Cameron Young, and it is Brian Harman. Let's start with the big 3. These are the biggest price tags, the guys that you're expecting the most out of, but you can't roster them all. You can't get access to all of them. How do we start splitting hairs amongst the top of the board here?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with who's been playing and who's been playing well, or who's been playing at all. I think Ludvig's got all the motivation in the world. He's played all fall. And, a lot was made when he went to the Ryder Cup that he had never played in a major championship before. Now, granted, he was in college, so he was taking classes, and, it's tough to make it to the Masters. But he sits on the official world golf ranking, Rick, at 53rd. I think that guy has all the motivation in the world. He goes, Ryder Cup, 2nd, 13th, 10th, whatever. I mean, this guy's just racking up great starts on all different types of golf courses. And if he gets in the top 50 after this week with a really good finish, he's going to go play Augusta.
Yeah.
And those other 2 guys, they're already there. So I think he's got a lot of motivation. We haven't seen Harman since the Ryder Cup, and Cam Young in Mexico. Oh, Mexico. Not his best showing.
No, it wasn't, which is it's certainly alarming for me. The idea of Ludvig, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier. There are some fairways which I'll have no problem hitting out there. But what is the advantage to a guy who is so long and straight like he is at these golf courses?
Oh, it's a huge advantage. There's no doubt about that. And that's not hyperbole whatsoever. You take the really good drivers of the golf ball, and we'll get to a couple of them as we go through, but I'm definitely favoring those guys in my DFS boards. There's no doubt about it. And it starts right there at the top. Obviously he'll be very popular, but it's tough to walk away from Ludvig. And, okay, so you talked about splitting hairs, right? Mm-hmm. So Cam Young, another great driver of the golf ball. But who's a little better right now and who's been playing more and who's got the proven track record? I think you got to go with Aberg.
Yeah. And the I don't want to call them red flags. Maybe they're pink flags for me is Cam Young, didn't really get to the finish line last fall in the way that he wanted to. He struggled coming down the stretch. And then you mentioned it, the one event that he played in Cabo, a T54 for a guy who was one of the favorites to win there. That starts sounding little alarms for me that I need to see something first. And when you've got him in a sandwich between Ludvig and Brian Harman, it's kind of tricky to click on Cam Young's name.
I mean, Brian Harman lives there, runner-up last year. I mean, you've got all the reasons in the world to look at him, especially with the confidence that he's playing with. First ever Ryder Cup, first ever major championship this past summer. Cam said it, in his interviews as the week went on down in Mexico. He goes, I'm working on some things. Well, it's obvious. He's working on some things.
Yeah, and when you're $10,900 and one of the favorites, I don't love to hear that you're working on some things. It makes me a little bit worried. Fair enough. Sorry, Keith.
No, I always say when I walk the range at those events, I'm looking for people that are working and they're working. So who has it working and who is working? And Cam Young right now, he's working.
And two things. Keith, you get to probably more events than some of these golfers do. How many events did you go to this year? 25? Have you gotten to 25 yet?
No, well, no, RSM. I fly out to RSM tomorrow. Will be my 22nd.
Okay. Oh, so you've played more than like Rory McIlroy has this year.
I I have. Yeah. I haven't teed it up yet, so I like his chances, but I've been to a couple, that's for sure.
And also, is the RSM driving range the best on tour?
Whew.
It's really beautiful. It's right there,
Man.
kind of around the back, and you got the ocean, and it's massive, and it's a big circle goes around. It's a top tier practice facility.
Oh man. Yeah, you hit me with that one because I've been to that place. I've played there so many times in their national pro-am, and it's so near and dear to my heart that like the only reason I paused there and didn't say like unequivocally yes was that because like I wish I was just there right now. It is that sweet. It's right there on the St. Simon Sound. It's just the coolest place. I mean a sunset there.
Mhm.
I can't think of a better range for a sunset. It's spectacular.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance, go check it out. It is phenomenal stuff. The 9K range here, Keith, is still full of great options. Corey Connors is 9,900. Then we get to Russell Henley, Alex Noren, and JT Poston. We round out the range with Justin Suh, Siwoo Kim, and Eric Cole. So now here is a bunch of those guys that if you attached 2023 champion to any one of these names, I don't think I'd be particularly surprised. So how do we go allocating our funds here in this range?
Well, I think again, you got to start with who's been playing golf. Corey Connors and Russell Henley, we haven't seen them in a while. And it seems as if when these guys in that first event, when they come back, especially an event like this, where average scoring is going to be in the high teens, if not pushing 20 under for the winner, you don't get a warm-up round, especially if that first round is on Plantation where you need to shoot 5 or 6 under in order to keep pace with the contenders at the top of the leaderboard. So I'm going to push those guys aside. And I mean, my question to you, Rick, was how do you not play Alex Noren, right? The things that he does really well. He putts the ball well. The guy's a grinder and he hits his irons really well. He did it last week. He's obviously in great form. How do we not go there again?
Yeah, this is some of the better form we've seen from Alex Noren in quite some time. It's the T3 in Vegas. It's the runner-up finish in Bermuda. The advanced metrics certainly trending in the right direction. I'm with you here, and I will find it interesting as we go further on in the week about who becomes popular and who doesn't become popular. I think there's going to be a lot of the Sea Island Mafia guys, and like how many of these types of guys can we get into our lineups, or even to the extent. And I agree with you. I worry a little bit about Corey Connors and Russell Henley not playing competitively for like the last 2.5 months, but there's going to be some percentage of people that say, oh, I haven't been able to play Corey Connors in 2.5 months. I'm going to go play Corey Connors. This is my last chance for a while. And what is that going to do to somebody like Alex Noren, who is actually cheaper this week than he was last week? Obviously, this is a stronger field, but that doesn't change the way that he's been playing. So I think you're right, Keith. We're kind of getting a bunch of factors right now where Alex Noren is appealing on Monday afternoon, and I think he's going to continue to be appealing Tuesday and Wednesday and until this thing tees off on Thursday morning.
Hey, for me, like when you go back to the other screen, this is why the cheat sheet's the cheat sheet, right? Look right there at the top, Corey Connors. Everyone's going to look at it and say, oh, he plays great at RSM. Look at those finishes. They're all nice green, Rick Gehman green colors and everything. But at the end of the day, he hasn't teed it up. Yeah. And he's going to need to roll out on Seaside or Plantation, probably in the rain on Thursday, and crank out a 4 or 5 under par. And ball striking wise, yes. Scoring wise, I don't know. Russell Henley the same way. I mean, if Russell Henley was in that lineup of winners, right? Or Streb and Tyler Duncan and all those guys, right? Svensson, Henley would fit right in there. But it's much easier. I mean, everyone's going to be all over Poston. They're going to be all over that guy. And I think you and I are smart enough that we know what we're going to get from Noren, and I would just go down the Noren road. One interesting note I want to bring up in that section is that you got Eric Cole hanging out there. So believe it or not, he took some weeks off. I mean, I don't
believe that.
I don't believe it either. But the big criticism on Cole all fall has been the driver. Right? The driver's the problem. But the guy's last 4 starts are 2nd, 3rd, 35th, and 4th. Like, if the he went to Zozo, driver was bad. Runner up. I mean, like what? Like, I think Cole's a legitimate guy to pay attention to here. This has been that kind of place where a younger, well, he's not a younger guy, but a newer guy to the tour steps up, plays really well, gets his first win. Like I think of like Mac Hughes and like when he was a rookie winning there. And so like, I don't know. I go Noren and Cole here, whereas everyone I think, yeah. Would I bet JT Poston to win it? Sure. But in the DFS strategy world, I think I might go the other way in the 9K.
Yeah, the 9K range is a pretty heavy game theory range because I think there's going to be guys that are going to suck up a lot of the ownership. I think there's going to be some natural pivots. And you're right. I mean, Eric Cole, he's the only place he generally loses is off the tee. And he's even not putted as well recently and still finds his way towards the top of leaderboards. But he has been hovering around this win. He's been tiptoeing around it all fall long. This might be the place that he breaks through, and he's at the bottom of that 9K range at $9,000. The middle, I'm with you, Keith. I think JT Poston's going to catch a lot of attention, but I want to point to one specific thing about him, because if you look at his recent form, great. You look at the way he should play at this golf course, makes a ton of sense. You look at his actual course history, 5 missed cuts and 7 trips. Is that concerning? Is it possible that this place just doesn't meet his eye, even though on paper it should be awesome, but these tournaments aren't played on paper?
Well, here's the thing. I know you're working on new tabs for next year. You need a Mafia tab, because if you did one for Sea Island, okay, the fact of the matter is, Rick, outside of Harmon's second place last year, a lot of those guys, they don't play well there. And I have a theory behind that, and it has a lot to do with being there. I'm around the property just like you are in the media center, and you're there early in the morning and late at night. And these guys are there late at night. That Matt Kuchar has to go to dinners. He has to have people over his house. Same thing with JT. Same thing with Brian Harman, right? They're not necessarily distractions because they're sleeping in their own bed, but they just take up time, right? And it's not the type of focus that I'm looking for a guy that might be a lot hungrier, like Noren walking away from last week versus JT. And if you look at all those numbers, I mean, Kuchar's another one. Just doesn't play that great there. And you would think, geez, man, why don't they play great there? Well, I can tell you this much. Where they live isn't always where they play the most.
Yeah.
Those are the facts. I worked at Isleworth back in the day, and we had 9 touring professionals there, none more famous than Tiger Woods. Tiger didn't play golf there. He practiced a lot, but he didn't play the golf course a lot, right? Why? Because he plays a lot of golf. They play 5 rounds a week with pro-ams all the time when they're out on tour, so they accumulate all of that stress in golf all the time. So they're looking for breaks. Those guys don't go, they're not like sitting there with their kids and going, oh, hey, I'm going to call up JT and DL3 and let's go play Seaside again. They don't do that. And I think that some of these guys that played in the SEC that we're going to feature later and everything that have played there in championships or maybe the Jones Cup, that's the type of guy that I'm looking for, that's really hungry and isn't, hosting a dinner for 12 people where their wife is yelling at him saying like, hey, did you take out the garbage? And I'm like, hey, I like my tea times in an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, maybe the guys that play in, I think it's Tuesday's wiffle ball game might not be the guys that you want to be rostering this week. A lot more responsibilities. Okay, well, we continue down to this 8K range, and I think there's a lot of really interesting options here as well. It starts with a guy we've already referenced with Matt Kuchar at the top, 8,900. Then we fill out the top of the 8Ks with Steven Yeager, Denny McCarthy, Adam Svensson, our defending champion. Brendan Todd sits in the middle, and then Billy Horschel, Luke List, Keith Mitchell, Akshay Bhatia, Alex Smalley, and JJ Spawn round out the rest of this 8K range here, Keith. So a lot of opportunities. Where do we look to first?
Of all the ranges, when the numbers came out today, this is the one I got the most excited about. I almost just wanted to draft 6 guys right in here if I could. It's one of those things where Billy Horschel,
yes,
right? Love him this week. I love the form that he's showing out on the DP World Tour. Exactly. I mean, you could pull it up right there. He went overseas this fall after he had a mediocre kind of season. He finished well, 3M well, Wyndham well. Then he goes over a couple top 20s across the pond on positional golf courses, like Le Golf National. Love that. The BMW, tough tournament, goes in there, fights there, gets a top 20, finish. So somebody like Billy Horschel, who's been runner-up here before and knows the property well, knows that range that you love and spoke so affectionately about well, has played there a long time. Todd Anderson was the director of instruction there a long time, is his teacher. Billy Horschel to me in that range. And Well, I'll stop there. I'm going to get you excited about Billy Horschel and see where you go.
Yeah, you got me all fired up here. I mean, I've already bet Billy at 40-1. I love this, right? And if you're not seeing what he's doing on the DP World Tour, you've missed 3 pretty darn good starts, and you're seeing a stat profile that is very different than what we've got from him the rest of 2023, where he was pretty clear about some of the struggles that he was going through. But it feels like everything is starting to come together, and it's showing that in his results. And the thing I like about Billy is, I mean, he's a capable winner, Keith. You know, you get him in the mix.
Oh, yes.
He is not afraid to win a golf tournament. There are some guys that can play well and they'll finish 3rd and 4th or whatever. But when Billy gets in the heat of it, he's not afraid to win a golf tournament.
There's no doubt about that. And, you know, there's a secret to playing Sea Island well or gaining on your competitors. And everyone's going to look at the approach buckets, Rick. They're going to look at that 100 to like 150 range, and they're going to look at all those short par 4s and everything. But the place where the guys make the biggest gains, and if you look at the guys that have won over the last couple of years, right, the place where they make the biggest gains in their approach play is long distance from 200 yards or more. So where are those shots coming in? Well, they're coming in on the par 5s. They're coming in on those long par 3s. That's where they're making the biggest gains. Everybody's great with a wedge in their hand, right? Now, it's somebody's weak with the putter, no doubt, but everyone's great with the wedge. Billy was known, and when he was striking the ball good, not necessarily this spring this year, but in his career, he was a great long iron player because he launches the ball high. I love this fit for him and where he's at in his game right now. So I'm pretty psyched about Billy Ho and his opportunity this week. And there's another guy in the 8K range that plays very similar to him, but is much longer and much better off the tee. And he's kind of like, this week, he's like a poor man's Ludvig when you start to talk about OTT play, right? Okay. And it's gonna be like low 50s in the morning, gonna be 70s in the afternoon. It's gonna be coastal. And I could just see a little bit of cashmere coming out, Rick. All right. Our man Killer Keith, right? You know where I'm going with this, because if you love, Pebble as a comp, then you got to love Killer Keith this week. And he's played this fall. So that's a prerequisite for me. Checks that box. And he's been just okay. But I think this is a place for him where we could see Keith do something special. I kind of like him this week.
Yeah, that's a pretty sneaky one too, because I don't think he's going to garner a ton of ownership, because there's a situation down here where Akshay was $10,000 last week and finished T20, which is another fine result, and now he's $2,000 cheaper. So if you paid $10K for Akshay last week, I see a lot of people going back and paying $8,100 for Akshay. But then you also get, Adam Svensson is here at 8,600, our defending champion, and everybody wants to be on Denny's first win. So there's, you look at this and Keith kind of gets, in my opinion, overlooked when these ownership projections start rolling in the next day or so.
And I think a little bit of long range, like I was getting into with Billy Ho, probably a little bit too in depth there in the weeds, but same thing with Ludvig we brought up. If you could drive the ball far and straight here, like Keith can, and you can hit your long clubs really good, I think you could start to separate. Again, the DFS world is just like betting the outright. It's like splitting hairs. So like, what is that factor going to be? What is the one thing that's going to separate you from the other 155 players? And I think Keith has that in the bag right now. Popular Akshay for sure. You're going to see a lot of people go after like another. Are we going to do another T30 with Steven Yeager? I mean, like what? Like, oh, man. I mean, like it at the end of the day. I just like that. And I think Kuchar's in there, 1 top 10 and 11 starts there at RSM. Not going to do it. Brendan Todd, his numbers there at Sea Island are not good. Right. So as much as he might be, the Bishop of Bermuda, forget it, man. Like he's for all intents and purposes. I don't see that in the 8K range. I mean, I like a great approach player who needs a little help with the putter, but maybe like a JJ Spawn. Like a ball striker like that, especially if the weather gets a little shaky there on Thursday and even into Friday.
JJ Spawn's got back-to-back top 16 finishes here at this event. If I said to you, you could only play one of Denny McCarthy, Adam Svensson, Brendan Todd. You only get one of them. That's it. And you got to play one. Where are you going?
Oh, man. I mean, McCarthy's all over podcasts. I mean, is he even practicing? Right. We've got Todd, and then you've got
Svensson.
Svensson. So I don't know what you said to Svensson out at Shriners, but look at his start since then. He's trending in the wrong direction.
I
And he
know.
was great early in the fall.
I gave
don't
him
know
I gave him the Rick run bad is what I gave him.
I don't know. You gave him the voodoo hex or something? Of those three, I guess I'd have to go Todd. I like DMAC the best, but he hasn't played, and I think this is going to be a track meet.
I think the Todd one's interesting because he's going to play out of the fairway. He's playing great golf, and what I think happens is, so Brendan Todd is very popular 5 times a year, right? Just like the short golf, you know what I mean? And everybody's like Brendan Todd, right? And that was Bermuda, and he finished T20, which a lot of people are going to just, oh, well, he didn't win, and now I'm done playing Brendan Todd for a while. A T20 is like a fairly high-end result for every single golfer in every single field. So it's not like he played poorly and everybody's going to forget about him. And I know the record around here is not great, but it's still a pretty good setup for him. I have no problem going back to Todd on a non-traditional Todd course.
In those three, I'll go Todd. But you talk about a relatively high finish. His last 2 starts at RSM were missed cuts, and he's got one top 10 and 9 starts there total.
It's not pretty.
Yeah. I mean, that looks like Valentine's Day. It's not good.
Yeah, it's really not good to have that much red.
No.
Anybody else in this 8K range? We covered a lot of them. We're going to take a break and continue down. But before we do, are there anybody else or anything that we should note before we move on?
I think you're going to see a lot of Davis Thompson this week. I think a lot of people are going to overlook Villegas, and Villegas is another one of those guys. I think that he's in good form. The way he flights the golf ball, it gets windy out there. 3 rounds on Seaside. You know how it's unprotected there. You've been there, right?
Yeah.
The way he played last week, and he's old enough that he's not out celebrating this week. He's like, I got one more week to grind this thing out. What's his FedEx Cup number? Right? He's still not in the top 125.
No, I think
right?
he still has work to. I think he still has work to do. Yeah.
So he's moved up. Yeah, because he just got 500 points. He's moved up. But anyway, he's definitely one of those guys that, like, I don't know. I think you're going to see. I mean, I look at some of the other ones there. I guess Taylor Pendrith. I'm going to go for the trifecta there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Taylor Pendrith.
Let's dive into Taylor Pendrith. Let's dive into some more of these guys. We're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
A game of honor. The Army-Navy game presented by USAA. Saturday, December 9th on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
And we're back. Here's what Taylor Pendrith has done. T3 at Shriners, T15 at the WWT Championship, and T8 in Bermuda. This has been just Taylor Pendrith on a roll, Keith.
Yeah, and he's gaining strokes all over across the board. It's not just with the driver and the length with him, the approach game. He's using the putter well, which we like to see coming into this event. I've bet him the last 2 weeks, and I can't see why I wouldn't do it again. Sorry, I jumped the gun on the 7Ks. I didn't. Okay. I thought he's playing so good. I thought he was in the 8s. That's my problem.
He should be.
He probably should be. Great value. And he's got 2 great starts at RSM. He's got a 26th and a 15th. So you look those up, and he's done well there.
Yeah, and he's gained basically 9 strokes putting in his 2 trips to the Seaside course. And remember, the Seaside course is the only one that has historically been with ShotLink laser. So that is only 6 rounds in 2 years on a ShotLink course, and he's gained 9 strokes putting. So maybe something that really fits the eye when he gets on those surfaces. You mentioned Davis Thompson and how popular he could be this week, a University of Georgia guy who I think is maturing rather quickly here. Keith, you're starting to see him put it together on the PGA Tour, do it via the ball striking and the tee to green play. He's got a stretch of really good golf here. Some of the best golf that we've seen from him as a professional.
I tell you what, I saw him at Wells Fargo. He played the first 2 rounds with Matt Neesmith and your eventual winner, Wyndham Clark. And for all intents and purposes, I couldn't figure out why Davis Thompson was like, after 2 rounds, he was a bunch of strokes behind Wyndham. He hit the ball beautifully, but it didn't seem like he knew what he was doing. He didn't know how to like play the golf course or maybe just play golf. Some of these guys are just so like uber talented that they don't necessarily have their wits about them, and just getting through the golf courses and learning about being on tour. Well, the maturation that he's gone through since Wells Fargo to now has had me bet him a couple times earlier this fall. I loved his fit out there at the Shriners, and if you like it there, I mean, off the tee, he could let it fly here. The guy is really, really comfortable on Bermuda grass. I think he's a good play, but I also think he's going to be super, super popular.
Yeah, I think he will too. I mean, the bunch of great finishes or decent finishes, a lot of green on the card. It's going to be hard to avoid that. You mentioned guys like Taylor Pendrith who might be a little bit undervalued. I think Matty Schmid is coming in fairly undervalued, right? He had the runner-up finish at the Andalusia Masters. He finished third in Bermuda. He's playing some great golf right now. For him to be 7,500 in the same conversation as Doug Gim, Mark Hubbard, Callum Tarrant, no offense to those guys, like it just feels a little bit off to me.
Well, I always come up with these crazy ideas, Rick, as a PGA pro, like I'm breaking down the golf course. And the one thing that I don't ever read when they're talking about Seaside is this is a par 70 golf course, right? Mm-hmm. So who are our best par 70 players in this field, right? And one of the guys that has a lot of experience there, he took lessons there, he's won there, but Chris Kirk, he's the fourth best par 70 scorer in this field, right? And there's a guy, great wedge game, puts the ball in play. I mean, look what he did at the Honda. Obviously, he can putt Bermuda. The resurgence he's had in his career, it's one of those things where like you got to pay attention to the fact that a guy that can play well on par 70 golf courses, which is going to be 3/4 of the rounds this week, is a different type of player than the guy that plays well on a par 72 golf course, right? They're much better on par 4 scoring. They have to be because there's just far less par 5s to make up those birdies. So I would pay attention to guys like that and other guys that are in that like top 10. And we've already talked about them. Keith Mitchell, Billy Horschel, JT Poston, Mac Hughes. All those guys are really good par 70 scorers in this field. And if you're on the fence, run a report with those. If you're picking between two guys, and that's why I would lean with some of them because, it's just when you don't get those 2 extra par strokes, it makes a big difference for some of these guys.
Yeah, it certainly does. It's a different course, course composition and throws things through a loop sometimes. Now you get to the bottom of this 7K range, and you start to get into some value options here, Keith, and some guys like Webb Simpson, whose record around this place is basically unbeatable, but I guess questions about recent form and how much he's played come into conversation. Is there anybody at the bottom of this 7K range that you think is worth taking a flyer on?
Well, I tell you, Vince Whaley's been impressive.
Yes.
Georgia Tech, obviously he can play Bermuda grass. I was talking to some folks last week on a pod, and we were talking about Vince. So he practices out of the Golf Club of Georgia. And so I see him fairly often because I have a student that practices out of there. And Vince is an unbelievable ball striker. He's uber long, but very straight. And he is just really, really good ball striker, very poor putter. He's from Texas. He's from the Dallas area. He switched teachers this past summer. He's been working a lot on his short game, and you can see the numbers and you can see the finishes, and the putter is coming around. So the putter is starting to catch up with the ball striking. And it could be, we saw a lot of it in Bermuda, but it could be one of those things where, he's played Sea Island a bunch of times, having gone to Georgia Tech competitively. So, I think it's going to be a place that's familiar for him, and he's in good form. And, he played a lot of Corn Ferry starts this year, and he doesn't want to do that. I've talked to him about it. So like he's definitely one of those guys that'll be fired up this week to really compete hard and just put in one more good hard week and see how low he can get that number.
Yeah, a lot to play for a lot of these guys, especially Vince Whaley, who's had a phenomenal fall and even going back to, some of his last starts on the Corn Ferry Tour. So he is hanging out at where did I just see his price?
He was like 7,200.
7,200. I scrolled right past him. 7,200 for Vince Whaley, kind of in the same spot as Sam Ryder, Webb Simpson, and Scott Stallings. The one other golfer that I did not want to get past is actually at the top of this range is Chesson Hadley, who Yeah, right. I didn't want to get too far away here. Back-to-back 7th place finishes for him in Vegas and in Cabo. And I see this here, Keith, where he's starting to pile up significant gains on the second shot. And he's always a very, very good putter. So the ability to kind of marry those two, a lot of confidence, hasn't missed the cuts since John Deere. You look at the rolling, cumulative strokes gained. That is an up and to the right trajectory for Chesson Hadley.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll be snapping a lot this week. He'll make his fair share of birdies. But all right, Rick, I actually had him as a fade this week because he's gonna model really well, but he's got 10 starts here.
Yeah.
He has no top 10s and he has no top 20s. Right. So and he went to Georgia Tech. So for all the reasons that I loved Whaley, he's played there a bunch. And for some reason, it hasn't been working. And he's played good in that area. Remember when he was really good down at Congaree a couple of years ago when Garrick Higo won and overtook him in the last round? I just think he's gonna be super popular, and I think he's one of those guys that you can favor to fade, and you're not gonna be burned by that.
This is really the course history is a problem, and especially because I think more so than other weeks. It matters around here. Not only the course rotation, but the nuances of these golf courses and the way they even play differently from one another, and having to deal with that from day in to day out. I think course history is rather important this week, at least compared to an average week. So yeah, this is shockingly bad for what Chesson has been doing in 10 trips.
And I would flip it for a second, Rick, and I would say in this range, what are you looking for in the 7Ks? Forget the names. What do you want out of this guy? Because it's not necessarily an outright winner, right? I mean, you'd love a top 10 or something like that, right? But what are we looking for? We need a guy to make the cut, who's solid and, kind of epitomizes the things we're looking for this week. So I looked away from Hadley because I had concerns about course history. And then I went down to 7,400. I think he's at 7,400, but Adam Schenk. This guy was the hottest guy. I mean, that guy finished 9th at the Tour Championship. He was essentially the 9th best golfer on tour this year, Adam Schenk. And he has a teammate that won there in Tyler Duncan. They were both Boilermakers at Purdue, right? Schenk's great on approach, right? He's good on positional golf courses, and he's an excellent putter. So he's already played once this fall. Could Adam Schenk, I mean, again, we're in the 7,400 range. I mean, what do we want? We want that guy to make the cut, and we want him to finish in the top 20 at least, and to put some birdie strings together. Well, his putter could do that, and his ball striking could lead him down that road to a lot of birdie chances.
What I love about Adam Schenk is when he plays well, he has legitimate top 10 upside. And there are some guys that when they play their best golf, you're not going to be able to squeeze that out of it. And you can see, I mean, the times where he has a good approach week, gains 4, 5, 6 strokes on approach, he turns it into results. It's not like he has to do multiple things well. And you see it. It's a very high upside, a little bit of a potentially lower floor. He might miss a couple cuts in there, but there are not many guys in this portion of this pricing board that could pile up top 10s like Adam Schenk can.
I mean, there's a lot of names there in the 7K range. If you run a report where it's, just the best approach players and the best putters, right? He's on that report and he's high up on it. And that's what you need to do there. It's just simply what you need to do.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Well, let's go scrape the bottom of the barrel here. The 6K range starts with Carson Young, not to be confused with Cameron Young, Grayson Sigg, Hayden Buckley, all amongst the $6,900 golfers. The middle of this range, that gets you into Bryce Garnett, Doc Redman, Frankie Molinari, that type of situation. And the very bottom, if you want access to Paul Haley, if you want access to Davis Love III, if you want access to Jim Herman, you've got it down there at the bottom. So, Keith, how are we filling out the bottom of our rosters here?
There's a couple names down there that I think are good fits, especially since you've alluded to the fact that you love a little course history or, some fond experience there out at the Sea Island Resort in the Golden Isles, right? How about Grayson Sigg? He's your course record holder. He shot 58 on Seaside.
Is that good? 58, not 59, 58. Is that good? That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, and he was good on the back nine too. No, he shot 58. He shot 12 under. Okay. And he plays there a lot. Good, good Southeastern Conference player. He's definitely one of those guys, Georgia guy that, oh man, definitely. I would keep my eye on him. I love myself a little Flash Gordon down there too. He's got some good course history. So Will Gordon's been playing good this fall. he's a guy in the 6K that could win. In
I
my honest
agree.
opinion.
I think we have to take Will Gordon seriously because he's got
Yeah.
immense talent that he is not put together as frequently as he would like, but he goes T21 at Zozo, T15 at Cabo, and then you combine it with 2 top 15 finishes in his 3 trips here. And you think that, hey, the timing might be right. He's going to one of the courses that he's played the best at in his career. Like I already said, immense talent. This is that feels about right to get to Will Gordon.
I mean, those are the names down. I mean, when we're in the 6K range, you're not going to get a lot of names. So
No.
I like the, one other name that really good wedge player, good putter, good player there. Patton Kazire, another guy I might have might be watching. But other than that, I looked for you, Rick, but yeah,
The only
it's week 45 or week 46, so come on.
The only other one that I'd consider is Grayson Murray, who's won twice in his last 12 starts or so. Now, both of them were on the Korn Ferry Tour. He won the Simmons Bank in September. But there are not a lot of golfers in the 6K range with the upside of 9, 10, 11, 12 strokes gained to the field, no matter what tour it is, like Grayson Murray has done. And he did it at John Deere. He did it at the Barbasol. So he's the other one that I think is terrifying. I think there's decent chance he misses the cut, but if he puts it all together, he plays well. He can make a lot of noise at this place.
I don't disagree with that whatsoever, for sure. It's not a stellar 6K field, but I think there's a couple value names there.
Could I entice you with Kevin Kisner? $6,800. He's the same price as Grayson Murray. He actually, you look at his profile. So he did not play from the Memorial.
Ski slope.
Yeah. He did not play from the Memorial to the Fortinet. So he's played twice this fall, 62nd, 51st. Lots of red. 2023 was not the year that Kevin Kisner wanted, but you look at his history around Sea Island and it's pretty darn gorgeous.
Rick, this is the RSM Classic, not the Barstool Classic. Move on. All right.
That's pretty good. I don't know if I can top that. I think we just have to stop right now. I don't know if I can top that at all. That's pretty good. Trying to think if there's anybody else, but no, I think that's it. All right, Josh, you can stop sharing my screen now. Keith Stewart, Read the Line. You put out it's a phenomenal website, phenomenal newsletter. Where can we find your work? Where can we get more access to you?
Oh, well, you could go to readtheline.com and you can subscribe. There's a free version and just check it out. And if you love it, then there's a paid version. But you'll also see on my website, I'm published. I do betting previews for Sports Illustrated, the Sporting News, PGA Tours, Golf Bet, the LPGA. I do cover the ladies. Yep. So I think it's worth mentioning. I had 3 ladies wins this fall, and they wrap up this week at the CME Group Tour Championship. Their top 60s playing down in Naples. That's going to be a cool event. And, Rick, just appreciate being with you. I love talking about this stuff.
I'm glad you mentioned the ladies because, Keith and I, we spend a lot of time on golf courses, walking around, chatting with each other. And yep. I love that you are ahead of the game on the LPGA because I'm starting to see more and more offerings at sites and fantasy sites and just having it on television more frequently to follow along with it. And you're already providing the content there and doing it very well, which I love.
Well, thank you. I mean, experts like yourself in the golf space, Rick, know that there's angles to be played in all of these, and whether it's leverage in DFS or it's knowledge in sports betting, and the LPGA and the brokers that are working with them are behind the game a little bit. There's not as much attention and focus there, and because the dollars aren't there, but they still pay. And when it's, when you have Angel Yin in Singapore and she wins at 50-1 and you wake up on a Sunday morning and you don't even have to sweat, it's already in the bank account. I mean, life is good at Read the Line, my friend.
Still pays for sure. That's exactly right. All right. Awesome. Big thanks to producer Josh. He does all the hard work behind the scenes. Keith Stewart from Read the Line, and you can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.